I heard the knock on the bridal suite door exactly 30 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle. I thought it was my mom coming to check on me again. But it wasn't. It was Anna, my maid of honor, my childhood best friend, and she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her lips were trembling, her eyes wide with horror. She held up her phone with a shaking hand. "Alina," she whispered, "you need to see this." My heart plummeted. I could feel it in my bones before I even looked. The photo on the screen was blurry, taken hastily, but there was no mistaking what it showed. Daniel, my fiancé, and Maya, my cousin and bridesmaid, in a compromising embrace. It was time-stamped. 30 minutes ago. My chest tightened. The room spun. Outside, I could hear the string quartet playing my prelude music. My guests were being seated. And the man I was about to marry was with my cousin. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. My eyes remained glued to the screen, trying to make sense of the impossible. I looked at Anna. "Is this a joke? Is someone playing a joke on me?" My voice sounded hollow, like it belonged to someone else. Anna shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. One of the waitstaff saw them sneaking around behind the vineyard. They thought it was weird. So they followed. "This photo. It's real, Alina. I'm so sorry." I sat down slowly on the edge of the dressing bench, unable to breathe. My mind was racing, grasping for any explanation that could dull the knife that had just been driven into my heart. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe they were saying goodbye. Maybe they had gotten too close by accident. Anything but this. But the truth was burning and undeniable. I had trusted them both with my whole heart. I had let Maya into my life, my wedding party, my sacred moment. I had believed Daniel would be the man who would protect me from all hurt, not the one who would cause the deepest wound. Anna kneeled in front of me, her hands on mine. "You don't have to go through with this. You can call it off. Right now. We'll get your things. We'll leave." And I considered it. I truly did. But something inside me felt frozen. Like if I moved, if I acknowledged what had just happened, I would shatter completely. I stood up, walked over to the mirror, and looked at myself. My wedding dress fit perfectly, every detail exactly as I'd dreamed. My hair was pinned in soft waves, makeup delicately done. But my eyes were hollow. Red. Haunted. I thought of the guests who had flown in, the money spent, the speeches written. I thought of my parents, so proud, sitting in the front row. I thought of the promises I had made to myself, that this day would be a new beginning. I closed my eyes, took one deep, shaking breath. Then I said the unthinkable. "I'm still going to marry him." Anna's gasp was immediate. "Alina, what? No, you can't." "I have to," I said quietly. I need to." I didn't know then if it was denial, shame, fear, or the crushing pressure of a picture-perfect life I had tried so hard to create. Maybe all of it, maybe none. But I made a decision that would shape everything to come. And as the final call for the ceremony rang out, I took one last look at my reflection, squared my shoulders, and stepped toward the door. Let me take you back. My name is Alina, and I met Daniel 2 years ago at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He was a last-minute addition, a friend of a friend tagging along. But the second he walked in, it was like the air changed. He had that presence, tall, confident, with a crooked smile and these ridiculously kind eyes. He struck up a conversation with me about my favorite author, and we talked for hours. He made me laugh, really laugh, in a way I hadn't in a long time. From there, everything fell into place so quickly. First dates turned into weekend getaways, and suddenly we were a team. A real partnership. We moved in together after 6 months. He proposed a year later. It was perfect. Or so I thought. Daniel had a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world that mattered. He would leave little notes in my lunch bag when I had a long day at work. He knew how I liked my coffee, extra cream, no sugar. He remembered obscure details, like how I cried when I saw old couples holding hands, or how I hated the sound of ticking clocks. When he proposed, it was under a blanket of stars at our favorite lake. He had prepared a little picnic, complete with fairy lights strung through the trees. I remember the way his voice trembled when he asked, and how I cried before I even said yes. That night felt like a promise, one I believed with all my heart. The first few months after the engagement were a whirlwind of happiness. Wedding magazines were scattered across our coffee table. Pinterest boards filled with floral arrangements and table settings grew daily. My parents were thrilled, and even Maya seemed genuinely excited. She offered to help right away, saying, "We need to make this the wedding of the decade." Looking back, it's hard to separate memory from warning signs. There were moments that seemed so small at the time, but grew heavier in hindsight. Like when Daniel began spending long evenings out, claiming late meetings. or when Maya would show up unexpectedly at our apartment, sometimes even when I wasn't there. I brushed them off. I trusted them. Maya and I had been close since we were kids. She was always the daring one, the bold one, the one who wore red lipstick at 13 and got away with it. I admired her confidence, her magnetic energy. But beneath that charm was something else, a hunger for attention. I had seen it play out before with boyfriends from high school or summer flings. But never did I think she would cross a line with someone I loved. In the months leading up to the wedding, our lives became consumed by planning. Daniel seemed increasingly distracted, but I chalked it up to stress. He was always so concerned about everything being perfect. He wanted to make sure the menu pleased everyone, that our playlist had all the right songs, that our families would get along. "It has to be unforgettable," he would say. I thought it was sweet. I thought he cared. Sometimes at night, I would catch him staring out the window, lost in thought. I'd ask him what was wrong and he'd just smile and say, "I'm just overwhelmed. It's a big step, you know?" And it was. But I was ready. I had never been more certain of anything in my life. My dress fitting was one of the happiest days I can remember. Standing there in front of the mirror, surrounded by lace and satin, I felt beautiful. My mom cried. Maya helped zip up the back, her hand steady. She looked at me and whispered, "You're going to be the most stunning bride." There was no trace of betrayal in her eyes. No flicker of guilt. Just that same familiar smile. We chose a vineyard as our venue, an old estate with rolling hills and a rustic barn. It had fairy lights strung between the trees and a cobblestone aisle that looked like something out of a movie. I imagined walking down that path so many times, pictured Daniel's face when he saw me, the tears, the joy, the life ahead. Our families got involved in the preparations. My dad took on the role of wine taster with a little too much enthusiasm. Daniel's mother and I spent weekends folding linen napkins and debating centerpieces. It all felt like one big, beautiful dream. But even in dreams, the ground can shift. One afternoon, I came home early from a planning meeting. Maya was there. I hadn't told her I was coming back early, and she looked startled when I opened the door. Daniel was in the kitchen, shirtless, claiming he had just finished working out. They both acted normal, too normal. I asked why Maya was there, and she said she had come to drop off some invitation samples. I didn't question it further. I didn't want to believe something was wrong. Denial is a powerful thing. It convinces you to trust when you shouldn't, to look away when the truth is staring you in the face. The night before the wedding, Daniel and I stayed at separate places. It was tradition, after all. I was with my bridesmaids at the hotel, while he stayed at a small cottage near the vineyard with his groomsmen. Maya had insisted on staying at the vineyard too, saying it was easier for setting up in the morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about our vows, about the life we were about to start. I texted Daniel, "I can't wait to see you tomorrow. I love you." He didn't reply. It didn't alarm me at the time. I figured he was asleep or just caught up in last-minute details. The next morning, I woke up to sunshine streaming through the window. My bridesmaids brought me breakfast in bed. My mom was already crying before her makeup was done. There was laughter, music, the smell of roses and lavender. It felt like a movie. Until Anna knocked on the door. Until I saw that photo. Until my fairy tale became a nightmare. And yet, for reasons I still can't fully explain, I chose to keep playing the role. To walk down the aisle, to say those vows, to pretend everything was still as it had been in the beginning. Because the beginning had been beautiful. It had been full of hope, of light, of dreams. And even as the truth unraveled, part of me clung to that beginning, wishing desperately it could be real again. But the truth was no longer a whisper. It had screamed its way into my life. The fairy tale was over. What came next was the real story. Maya and I weren't just cousins. We were born only 3 months apart and practically raised as sisters. She was there for my first heartbreak, for my high school graduation, and even the night I moved into my first apartment. We shared everything growing up, clothes, secrets, and even dreams about our weddings. If you had asked me who I trusted most outside of my immediate family, I would have said Maya without hesitation. She was beautiful in a way that turned heads, tall, dark curls, eyes like espresso, and a confidence that walked into every room 5 seconds before she did. People gravitated toward her. I did too. There were times I felt like the sidekick in our duo, but I never resented her for it. I admired her. I thought she had a magnetic soul. After Daniel and I got engaged, Maya practically moved into my life. She lived 3 hours away but started visiting every other weekend. At first, I was thrilled. I needed help planning the wedding, and Maya had an eye for design. She threw herself into the preparations with full enthusiasm, creating spreadsheets, color palettes, and mood boards. She even suggested vendors I hadn't considered. To everyone else, she was the supportive cousin. To me, she was a lifeline during a stressful time. But then there were things. Little things. She started asking odd questions about Daniel. Personal things. What does he do when he's upset? Or, do you think he ever gets bored of routine? Questions that made me tilt my head but never fully process. Then came the jokes. If Daniel ever has a twin, you'd better watch out, she said once, laughing a little too hard. I remember how he glanced at her, an awkward pause in his laughter. I saw it. I just didn't know what it meant. One evening, Maya and I stayed up late, going over flower arrangements. Daniel had gone out for drinks with a coworker. Maya was sipping wine, giggling at something on her phone. Then she turned to me and said, "Do you ever worry about forever? Like marrying someone and realizing later they weren't who you thought?" I shook my head. No, I trust Daniel. He's never made me question him. She gave me a look I couldn't read, one I still remember clearly. Her smile was soft, but her eyes, they looked sad, pained, regretful. I didn't know. She quickly changed the subject, but something about that moment lodged itself in the back of my mind. As the weeks went on, she began texting Daniel directly, under the guise of wedding planning. I didn't think much of it at first. She was helping, after all. But then one evening, I caught a glimpse of her name on his phone when he received a message. He turned it over quickly, but not before I saw it. "You're impossible, haha. Stop tempting me." I asked who it was. He said it was just a meme she sent about cake flavors. And I believed him. Because I wanted to. One weekend, she arrived a day earlier than planned. Daniel and I had planned a quiet night in, just the two of us, but she showed up at our door with takeout and a bottle of wine. "Surprise," she sang. I was annoyed, but didn't want to hurt her feelings. That night, I went to bed early with a headache. I asked Daniel to help her get set up in the guest room. When I woke up a few hours later, the apartment was quiet. Their wine glasses were still on the table. Both empty. I found him asleep on the couch. Alone. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I didn't go check the guest room. I didn't want to know. Then came the week of the wedding. Maya was more present than ever. She took over duties from the wedding planner, charmed our families, even fixed the last-minute dress alterations for one of the bridesmaids. Everyone praised her for being so selfless, so helpful. But I noticed she and Daniel were whispering more. Standing a little too close. Laughing at things no one else understood. I asked her once, jokingly, "Have you two formed a secret club or something?" She smiled and said, "Maybe we have." That night I had a dream. I was at the altar about to say my vows, and I turned to look at the guests. Maya was standing in my place, holding Daniel's hand. Everyone was clapping. I woke up sweating. I told myself it was just stress. Wedding nerves. After all, Maya had always been flirtatious, always had that energy. It didn't mean anything. The day before the wedding, I arrived at the venue early to check on setup. I couldn't find Daniel anywhere. One of the staff told me he'd gone for a walk with one of the bridesmaids. I asked who. She said, "The tall one with the curls." "Maya." I called him. No answer. I called her. No answer. I waited on the steps of the barn for nearly an hour. When they finally came back, they acted surprised to see me. "Sorry," Maya said, panting. "We were just checking the path from the cottage to the reception area. Didn't realize we'd lost track of time." Daniel nodded, saying nothing. I forced a smile. But inside, something was unraveling. That night, as I lay in bed surrounded by my bridesmaids, laughter and makeup brushes flying around the hotel suite, I stared at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that everything was fine. I was marrying the man I loved. I was surrounded by friends and family. Maya was just being Maya. Flirty. Fun. A little too much sometimes. But she loved me. Didn't she? When I finally drifted off to sleep, it was with a sense of quiet unease in my chest. I told myself I was just overwhelmed, that every bride feels doubt. But I wasn't doubting the marriage. I was doubting the people in it. And I had no idea just how right my instincts were. What I didn't know was that the betrayal I feared had already happened. That while I was rehearsing my vows, writing love notes, dreaming of forever, two people I trusted more than anyone were already stealing moments behind my back. And in just a few short hours, it would all come crashing down. There are moments in life when sound disappears. When everything around you goes quiet, like someone pressed mute on the entire world. That's what happened the moment I saw that photo, the photo that confirmed everything I was too scared to believe. The ceremony was starting in half an hour. My hair was perfectly curled, my makeup flawless, my dress steamed and ready. My guests were sipping champagne, smiling, waiting. And I was sitting on the edge of the bridal suite sofa, staring at a photo that would tear my world in two. I don't even remember getting up. One moment I was seated, the next I was walking, storming, really, down the corridor, clutching Anna's phone like a weapon. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to see him. I had to see them. I found them behind the barn, near the small vineyard path where we'd planned to take our couple's portraits. Daniel was buttoning his shirt. Maya stood a few feet away, arms crossed, face flushed. They looked like teenagers who had just been caught sneaking out. When Daniel saw me, he froze. His mouth opened slightly like he might speak, but nothing came out. Maya turned her back to me, as if that would erase what had just happened. I held out the phone. You forgot the cameras, I said coldly. This place has staff. People. They saw you. Daniel swallowed hard. Alina, Don't. I cut him off. Don't insult me with an excuse. He stepped forward, eyes pleading. It wasn't planned. It was stupid. I didn't mean for it to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen 30 minutes before you married me? My voice cracked at the end. My hands were shaking. I felt like I might vomit. Maya finally turned to face me. It didn't mean anything, she said. Her voice was calm. Detached. I stared at her. You've known me your entire life. You helped me pick my dress. You cried when I asked you to be a bridesmaid. She looked away. Daniel reached out, like he thought he could fix this with a gesture. I love you, Alina. Please, let's talk about this. I stepped back. No, there's nothing to talk about. And yet, 25 minutes later, I walked down the aisle. I don't remember the music. I don't remember the flowers or the guests standing. I remember looking at him, this man I thought I knew, and wondering how someone could lie so well with their eyes. He cried when he said his vows. Everyone thought it was romantic. I knew it was guilt. I said mine too. I said them clearly with strength. Not because I believed them, but because I refused to fall apart in front of everyone. Because I wasn't going to let them steal everything from me. When the officiant said, "You may now kiss the bride," I turned my cheek. The guests laughed. They thought it was cute. Quirky. But I knew what it really was. It was my last act of resistance before everything changed. Our wedding reception was a blur of fake smiles, clinking glasses, and laughter that sounded like static in my ears. Daniel held my hand like nothing had happened. He whispered things like, "We made it," and "You look incredible," and smiled at the crowd like he wasn't a man who had just betrayed everything we stood for. I played along. I smiled. I danced. I posed for pictures. But inside, I was cracking with every step. My body moved through the motions, but my soul? It was somewhere back in the bridal suite, still staring at that photograph. I remember the first dance. He chose the song, a slow, emotional ballad about fate and forever. Everyone circled around us with phones and hearts full of admiration. They saw two lovers, glowing in their newlywed bliss. But I saw a stranger. As he led me in that dance, I stared at the curve of his jaw, the slope of his neck, trying to remember if he had always looked like this. Or if my mind was now painting him in a different light, one full of shadows. "We can get through this," he whispered against my ear. "I swear, Alina. I love you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. Every time I looked at him, I saw Maya. The reception ended late, and everyone kept telling us how beautiful everything had been. My mother wept. My father hugged Daniel like a son. Maya, she avoided me all night. Smiled when others looked, but her eyes never met mine again. I was grateful for that. Because if they had, I might have hit her. We left for the honeymoon the next morning. A beach resort in Bali, secluded and picturesque, a paradise designed for two people in love. Except we weren't those people anymore. We didn't talk on the flight. I wore sunglasses to hide my swollen eyes. Daniel kept trying to hold my hand. I let him. Part of me still wanted to believe he meant what he said, that it was a mistake, that we could somehow fix this. But the other part of me knew better. The first few days at the resort were tense. He tried to be affectionate. He planned private dinners on the beach, booked couples massages, kissed me like nothing had shattered between us. But every touch felt like a lie. Every kiss made me feel smaller. I started waking up at night gasping. I had dreams of walking into that vineyard again, finding them together. I had dreams where I screamed at him in front of everyone, tearing off my veil, running barefoot into the forest. And I woke up angry that I hadn't. On the fifth night, I finally broke. We were sitting on the balcony, wine glasses between us, the ocean a soft roar in the background. Daniel was telling me about the next day's scuba diving plans when I interrupted. "Why did you do it?" He blinked. "What?" "Maya. 30 minutes before our wedding. Why?" He rubbed his hands over his face, groaning. "Alina, I told you it was a mistake. I was drunk, overwhelmed. She was there. It just happened. It just happened? I spat. Daniel, that's not something that just happens. That was a choice. A deliberate betrayal. He stared at me, jaw tightening. I know I hurt you. But I'm trying. I'm here. I'm doing everything I can to fix this. No, you're pretending it didn't happen. You're hoping that if you book enough dinners and hold my hand enough times, I'll forget. But I can't forget. I see her every time I look at you. He was silent for a long time. Then he whispered, Do you want to leave me? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because the truth was I didn't know. I had built my entire future around this man. Around this relationship. Letting go of him would mean letting go of everything I had planned. But staying meant losing myself. When we returned home, we slipped into silence. On the surface, everything looked normal. We went to work. We attended family dinners. We smiled at friends. But at night, I turned my back to him in bed. He started sleeping on the couch. I avoided Maya completely. She reached out once, a text that said, Can we talk? I never replied. I couldn't hear her voice. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Our therapist said healing was a process. That trust could be rebuilt. But how do you build something when the ground it stands on is poisoned? I didn't know how to be a wife to a man I no longer recognized. One night, about 2 months into our marriage, I came home late. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. There were tears on his face. I think I broke you, he said quietly. I sat down across from him. No, you didn't break me. You broke us. And I'm still trying to figure out if there's anything left to fix. He nodded. He didn't argue. Because he knew the truth. The silence between us was louder than any scream. Time became a strange, shapeless thing. Days passed without meaning. Weeks blurred into one another. I started waking up without knowing what day it was. Only that it was another morning I had to pretend. I went through the motions of marriage, but I was emotionally absent. I cooked dinner, did laundry, watered the plants, but everything felt mechanical, like I was playing a part in someone else's life. Daniel noticed. Of course he did. But instead of pushing me to open up, he gave me space. Or maybe he was just afraid of what he'd hear if he asked the wrong question. We stopped going to therapy. I told him I needed time. What I meant was, I needed space to breathe without his shadow hovering beside me. I needed to sit in my pain without someone trying to wipe it away with apologies. Sometimes I would sit in the bathroom for hours, the door locked, the lights off, just breathing. Other times I'd take long drives at night with no destination. Just the road, the wind, and music loud enough to drown out my thoughts. I started writing in a journal again. At first, it was just fragments of thoughts. Anger, grief, guilt. But eventually it became more. I started writing letters. To Daniel. To Maya. To myself. I never gave them to anyone. But it helped to put it down on paper, the ugly, unfiltered truth. I wrote things like, You broke me in the worst way, not with cruelty, but with cowardice. I missed the version of you I thought was real. Maybe the betrayal wouldn't hurt so much if it had come from a stranger. One evening, about 4 months after the wedding, I visited my parents. My mom was folding laundry, and my dad was watching the news. They asked how Daniel was, and I lied. I said we were fine. That we were just adjusting. Then my mother said, You seem tired. Are you okay? I smiled. I'm just working a lot. The truth hung in the room like smoke. I wanted to scream, he cheated on me with Maya. On our wedding day. But I didn't. Because I didn't want to destroy their image of him. Because I didn't want to reopen the wound. But it was already open. Always bleeding. I hadn't seen Maya since the wedding. But her absence wasn't comforting. It was infuriating. She had ghosted the family, made excuses not to attend gatherings, claimed she was going through something personal. The cowardice in that stung more than her betrayal. And Daniel, he started trying less. Maybe he thought I was coming around. Maybe he was tired too. I don't know, but we stopped having real conversations. Our silences became longer than our interactions. He stopped leaving flowers on the counter. He stopped asking how my day was. We became roommates with wedding bands. One rainy afternoon, I found him standing at the window, staring at the street below. He turned to me and said, Do you hate me? I didn't answer right away. Because I didn't know the answer. Some days, I finally said. Some days I miss you. Some days I hate you. Most days I don't know how to feel. He nodded. I think I deserve that. I sat down beside him, not to comfort him, but to be honest. I don't want to hate you. But I can't love you right now either. We sat in that silence for nearly an hour. No words. Just the sound of the rain, and the weight of everything we hadn't said. That night I dreamed again. This time, I was in our wedding dress walking down the aisle. But the aisle was empty. No guests. No music. Just me walking toward no one. And for the first time, I didn't feel scared. I felt free. I woke up crying. Something inside me had shifted. I was tired of being quiet. Tired of pretending. Tired of protecting the people who hurt me. The next day, I called Maya. She didn't answer. I left a voicemail. I don't know if you even care, but I need you to hear this. You betrayed me in a way I will never forget. I don't hate you, but I won't protect your shame anymore. Then I hung up. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time afterward. My hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter. Later that evening, I told Daniel I wanted a break. He didn't fight me. He just asked, "Are you coming back?" And I said, "I don't know." Because for the first time since the wedding, I was being honest. I packed a bag, booked a small cottage up north near the coast, and left the next morning. It wasn't dramatic. I didn't slam doors or cry. I just left. That week alone was the beginning of my healing. I hiked. I read books. I listened to the ocean. I wrote more letters. I stopped trying to make sense of what had happened and started focusing on how I wanted to feel going forward. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure. I needed peace. And slowly I started finding it. The cottage up north became my sanctuary. It was nestled between pines and perched close enough to the ocean that I could hear waves crashing against the rocks even from the bedroom. I didn't have a TV. I didn't bring my laptop. Just a journal, a few books, and my silence. Each morning, I made tea and walked to the edge of the cliffs. I watched the sun climb out of the water, golden and relentless, and I felt like I was witnessing something ancient and healing. There was something sacred about being alone. About hearing only my thoughts and finally learning which ones were mine and which were echoes of Daniel's voice or Maya's presence. I spent the days doing small things. Cooking, cleaning, rearranging furniture, picking wildflowers. It was the first time in over a year that I wasn't thinking about a wedding or therapy or how to pretend I was okay. I had space to feel. And what I felt more than anything was grief. Not just for what had happened, but for the life I had imagined. The wedding wasn't just a day. It was the foundation of the future I'd spent years dreaming about. Now it was a monument to betrayal. A reminder that even the most beautiful days can hold the darkest secrets. I cried often. In the shower. On long hikes. Over coffee. But the crying wasn't hopeless. It was cleansing. I was emptying out the parts of me that had stayed quiet for too long. One afternoon, I wrote a letter to myself. I titled it Permission. In it I wrote, "You have permission to let go. You have permission to mourn what you lost, but you also have permission to build something new. You do not owe your pain to anyone. You are allowed to be happy again." I folded the letter and placed it under my pillow. Every night, I read it before I slept. About 2 weeks into my stay, I got a text from Daniel. "Daniel, just checking in. Hope you're okay." I stared at the screen for a long time. I could have ignored it. I could have answered with kindness. Instead, I replied, "Me, I'm starting to be." He didn't text again. And that silence felt like a gift. Another unexpected gift came on my final day at the cottage. A handwritten letter in the mailbox. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Maya. My stomach turned as I opened it. It read, "Alina, I've thought about writing this for months. I've started it 100 times. But nothing I say can change what I did. You trusted me. You loved me like a sister. And I repaid that love with selfishness and betrayal. I don't expect forgiveness. I wouldn't forgive me either. But I want you to know I never meant to fall for him. I didn't plan it. That doesn't excuse it, but it's the truth. I've been in therapy. I'm trying to understand why I destroy the things that matter most. I hope one day you find peace. I hope one day you can forget me. Maya." I read the letter 3 times. It didn't bring closure. It didn't undo what happened. But it reminded me that I wasn't the only one haunted by those 30 minutes before my wedding. Maya would carry that with her too. I didn't write back. But I no longer wished her harm. That night, I stood on the cliff's edge, the wind in my hair, and whispered the words I had never dared to say out loud. "I forgive you, but I'm leaving you behind." I didn't know who I was speaking to, Daniel, Maya, or maybe even the version of myself that accepted less than I deserved. But the moment felt holy, like the beginning of a new chapter. The next morning, I packed my things and drove back home. But I wasn't the same woman who had left. Coming home was different this time. I wasn't stepping back into a marriage. I was stepping into my life. The apartment Daniel and I had shared suddenly felt too small. Too familiar. Too haunted. His presence lingered in every room, in every unspoken word. I stayed only one night before I called my friend Clara and asked if I could crash on her couch until I figured things out. She didn't ask questions. She just hugged me tight and handed me a blanket. The first thing I did was meet with a lawyer. It felt surreal sitting in a sleek office, sipping coffee while discussing how to dissolve a marriage that wasn't even a year old. I felt embarrassed at first, like a failure. But my lawyer looked me square in the eye and said, "It takes courage to leave something broken before it breaks you too." Those words stayed with me. Telling my parents was even harder. They were confused. Hurt. My mom cried and asked what happened. My dad grew quiet, as if processing a personal loss. I didn't tell them everything, just enough for them to understand that Daniel had betrayed me, and that it wasn't something I could forgive. "Are you sure?" my mom asked. "I've never been more sure of anything," I said. And I meant it. The next few weeks were full of paperwork, deep breaths, and small victories. I got a new phone number. I found a part-time apartment while I searched for something more permanent. I donated my wedding dress. That was the hardest part, letting go of the physical symbol of a future that never arrived. But as I watched the donation truck pull away, I felt lighter. Freer. One evening, I sat down and made a list. I titled it, "Things I Want Just for Me." At the top was travel alone. Then take a pottery class. Get a dog. Paint something I'm proud of. These weren't goals for a couple. They were for me. I started waking up earlier. Going for walks without a destination. Cooking meals from scratch. I read books I'd been putting off. I journaled. I cried. I laughed. Sometimes all in one day. And slowly, people began to notice. "You look different," Clara said over coffee. "Like someone who just got out of prison." Maybe I did, I smiled. About 2 months after I filed for divorce, I ran into Daniel. It was at a bookstore of all places. We reached for the same book. When our hands touched, I felt a jolt, but not of love. Of memory. He looked thinner. Older. Tired. "Hi," he said quietly. "Hi," I replied. We stood in awkward silence for a few moments. "You look good," he offered. "Thanks. So do you." Another silence. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I am," I said. And it was the truth. He nodded. "I'm sorry again. I know that doesn't fix anything, but—" "I know," I interrupted. "And I hope you're healing too." He looked surprised. Grateful. "I'm trying." We didn't hug. We didn't exchange numbers. We just stood there, two people who had once promised forever, now strangers bound by a shared wound. As I left the store, I felt no anger. No heartbreak. Just peace. I had reclaimed my name. My voice. My future. And I wasn't looking back. Healing didn't come in a single wave. It came in ripples, small, quiet moments where I chose peace over pain, growth over grief. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It didn't look like the movies where someone throws their ring into the sea and dances in the rain. It looked like drinking tea in silence. Like journaling by candlelight. Like not checking my phone when I missed him, because I no longer needed to. I began to notice the small wins. Like the way I no longer flinched when someone mentioned weddings. Or how I stopped checking Maya's social media, stopped wondering what she was doing, or if she missed me. I accepted that closure doesn't always come from the people who hurt you. Sometimes it comes from accepting that their chapter in your life is simply over. One Saturday morning, I joined a pottery class. I sat at the wheel, hands covered in clay, shaping something imperfect and fragile, and I cried. Not because I was sad, but because I finally felt free to feel something, anything, without judgment. There was power in creating something from nothing. I felt like I was rebuilding myself, one soft spin at a time. Clara encouraged me to start dating again, but I wasn't ready. Not because I feared being hurt, but because I was enjoying the company of myself for the first time in years. I took solo trips, went to movies alone, even took myself out to dinner. And I loved it. I started a blog. At first, it was anonymous. Just a place to spill my thoughts and stories. But soon, people started reading, responding. Women wrote to me, thanking me for saying what they hadn't been able to. I realized that my pain wasn't unique, but my healing could be empowering. And slowly, life began to bloom again. I adopted a dog. A rescued spaniel with big brown eyes and a heart that needed mending just like mine. I named her Luna. She reminded me every day that love doesn't always come from where you expect, but it still finds you when you're ready. Seasons changed. I stopped counting how long it had been since the wedding. I stopped defining myself by what Daniel and Maya had done. I was no longer a victim of their choices. I was the author of my own next chapter. And as I stood one morning on my balcony, sunlight warming my face, Luna curled at my feet, coffee in hand, I realized something profound. I survived. Not just the betrayal. Not just the silence. I survived losing the life I thought I wanted. And I had found something better. Myself. I used to think the biggest moments in life were the loudest, the grand gestures, the confessions, the endings that came with slammed doors or tearful goodbyes. But the biggest moment of my life arrived quietly. It came with acceptance, with a soft exhale, with looking in the mirror and finally recognizing the woman staring back. I wasn't her on my wedding day. That woman was terrified. She walked down the aisle with a heart breaking beneath a perfectly stitched bodice. She smiled through betrayal. She made herself small to preserve an illusion. But the woman I am now, she doesn't bend to avoid discomfort. She faces it, she holds it, studies it, and then releases it. I'm not saying I have everything figured out, I don't. But I finally trust myself to navigate the unknown. It's strange how healing works. It sneaks up on you. One day, you realize your laughter is genuine again. Your shoulders aren't clenched. Your dreams don't end in betrayal. You look at the past and feel gratitude, not for the pain itself, but for who you became because of it. People often ask me if I'd go back and change it all, stop myself from walking down the aisle, from trusting the wrong people. I used to think yes. Of course I would. But now, I don't think I would. That moment of devastation shaped the woman I am today. Without that heartbreak, I wouldn't have found this strength, this peace, this version of me that feels whole on her own. Eventually, I did start dating again. Nothing serious at first. A coffee date here, a conversation there. I learned to set boundaries. To walk away at the first red flag. To never confuse attention for affection or validation for love. And then one day, someone came into my life, not to complete me, but to walk beside me. His name is Ethan. He knows everything. I told him the whole story on our fourth date, expecting him to flinch or disappear. He didn't. He just said, "You've been through a war, and you came out glowing. That's not weakness. That's power." I don't know where this story with Ethan will go. But I do know this, I'm not afraid of the ending. I've learned that endings are not failures. They're openings, invitations to begin again. Sometimes I pass by that vineyard, the one where I got married. It doesn't sting the way it used to. I don't feel anger or sadness. I feel gratitude, because that place was where my life broke and where I realized I could build again. I've also reconnected with my family. Maya is still distant, and that's okay. Some wounds don't need reconciliation. They just need release. I no longer carry her betrayal like a badge. I've put it down, and in its place I carry compassion for myself. To anyone reading this, wondering if you'll ever recover from the thing that gutted you, you will. It won't happen all at once. It might not even look like healing at first. But one day, you'll wake up and feel sunlight on your skin, and it will feel like a beginning. Because it is. You don't need to be who you were before the pain. You can become someone new. Someone wiser. Softer. Stronger. I am not the woman who was cheated on. I am the woman who chose herself. And that will always be the most powerful choice I've ever made.